developing independent writers in kindergarten. How can you empower your child to be an independent writer?
The writing office is a really important tool that students can use to help them become independent writers. And students realizing that they are writers and that they can write independently is a really empowering way to help them improve their writing and realize that they don't need an adult to help them all the time and they can be a writer. I'd like to show you some of the tools that the students have access to on their writing office. Now, first we have the alphabet chart, which they can find in the middle section. And this tool can help them with many different things. It can help them with seeing how to correctly form the letter when writing. It can help them to make sure that their letter is facing the right direction. Sometimes students flip their letters, and so they can check them here. It can also help them with sounding out words. As you can see, there are pictures that correspond with each letter, and it helps with at least one of the sounds that each letter makes. So if students, for example, are trying to figure out which letter does the word bat begin with, they can think, well, bat begins with B, but what letter is that? So maybe they can look at the pictures and see, which of these pictures begins with B? And they can see, oh, the ball. And so they can know that this letter, B, is the letter to write when sounding out the word B for bat. Next we have our blends and digraphs chart. Now students can see some of the other sounds that might be a little more complicated for them, but again, they have a picture reference that can be very helpful. At the top we have all the digraphs that we've been learning, including CH, SH, TH, WH, and PH. So again, they can use these pictures as a reference for which sounds each thing makes. The last tool in the middle section is this chart here, and this gives students ideas of how they can write and spell words. Now, what we encourage them to do is first to always use the room. So this can mean a few different things. A lot of times there are words all around us, and so we can use the words that we already see around us to help us write words. Additionally, in the classroom, we have a word wall that has all our sight words. So if you would like to have your students write sight words and post them around the room, that can be helpful as well. But this is a great tool, just using the room around them. Secondly, they can say it slowly to hear the sounds. It's very important that the student is the one saying the word and sounding it out. It makes it easier for them to hear the sounds. And if they stretch it out and say it slowly, so instead of just saying cat, they can say at. Often I encourage them to say it in slow motion. That can help them to hear each individual sound, and then they can write the letter that corresponds with each of those sounds that they know. And finally, if they are really having trouble with a word, maybe they're forgetting some of the sounds, or they are having difficulty sounding out the word, maybe it sounded unfamiliar to them for some reason, then of course they can ask a friend, or you, the parent, or a sibling, or someone else. But again, it's most important that they are doing everything they can to sound out the word. So even if that means they can only sound out part of it independently, as long as they can do as much as they can independently, maybe you can just help them with 1 or 2 sounds in the word or something like that. The colors and numbers charts are another resource that students have on their writing office. Now, students write about colors and numbers often, so this is a great reference point for them, printed in color with the color words as well as the number symbols and the number words. Again, in kindergarten, students often flip some of their numbers, so this is a great reference to make sure their numbers are facing the right way. And then also, some of the number words are a little on the tricky side, so this is also a great reference for that as well. Students also have a class list, and this is simply just a reference for if they want to write about their classmates and their friends. They can see how to correctly spell their name. We know that names are one of the most difficult things to write, as our names come from a variety of different languages. And just a note, The one thing that you can feel free to help your student with writing is anyone's name. We recognize that sounding it out is kind of challenging and might not work for some names depending on what language they come from. So please feel free to help your student when writing names of things or people. Here's the writing rules chart. Now here you can see the 5 things that students check for every single time they write a sentence. And in your writing notebooks, we have this as a checklist, and also on some of our writing paper, we have this as a checklist. So students can make sure that they check for each of those things there. Here we have what these things represent, as well as examples of each of them. So starting your sentence with a capital letter, using finger spaces between each word, using punctuation at the end, making sure our sentences make sense. The students can do this by rereading what they have written to make sure it makes sense. And finally, making sure they draw a picture to match what their writing is. At the bottom, students have a section for words I use. Now this is a place where students have words that they often like to write about as just a quick reference. For example, some students really love to write about pizza or unicorns or school. So they might have pizza, unicorn, school, and that just helps them as they write for a quick reference for how to write and spell the word without having to think through it so much if it is something they write all the time. Now this is not a place for classmates' names or colors or numbers, things like that, things that are already on our writing office, but other words that they like to use often. Now, if students have something that they realize, oh, this is a word I use a lot, they can feel free to add it. All your students should have at least some empty spaces in this section of the chart. Finally, at the top of their writing office, they should have their name, and this can be a great example to show them how they can properly write their name as far as the spacing with the uppercase and lowercase letters. Additionally, there are the hands to show them their left and their right in case they need that as a reference as well. And that's all the things that we have on our writing office.
Here are some ways to help your child to be an independent writer.
One way to encourage your student as an independent writer is to help them realize that they can sound out words by themselves. Now, we have practiced this a lot at school. If they don't know a word, they should try and sound it out, not just immediately ask someone else to write it for them or tell them what letters the word needs to be spelled. Now, this can be done in a variety of ways. For shorter words, we can just slowly stretch out the word. I often tell students to say it in slow motion to hear each of the sounds. So as I mentioned before, if they're sounding out a word like cat, they're just saying it in slow motion, k, at, and they can hear all 3 of those sounds, k, at, to write cat. Now, we have recently learned about syllables, and a great way to write longer, trickier words is to first realize how many syllables the word has. So for example, if a student wants to write butterfly, they might first think butterfly. Now, they can sound out each syllable and write it that way. So first part, so they can sound out then second part, butter. So the second part is tur, so they can write and then last part, butterfly. So the last part is I, and they can write each of the letters that corresponds with those sounds. Now this is a newer thing that we have been learning about syllables, so your student might need more assistance to help to track what each syllable is and then sounding out each part of the word. However, the most important thing is almost every student knows the majority of their letter sounds at this point in the year. Of course, it's completely normal if every once in a while one is forgotten and then you need help identifying which letter makes that sound. However, for the most part, they can all sound out words very independently, whether they realize it or not. Sometimes they just need some extra encouragement, saying that you can do this. But again, with those longer words, maybe you can guide them just by saying, okay, what's the first part of the word? What letters make those sounds? And then what's the second syllable in the word? What's the third syllable in the word? And things like that.
Mom, how do I write happy? Why don't you try sounding it out? What is the first sound you hear? H. Good. Keep going. A. P. E. E. Mom, what letter makes the E sound? That is a good question. Maybe you can try to think or look at the alphabet chart and see which letter makes the I sound. Try to think. Make your best guess. Is it I? The letter I does make the I sound. Thanks, Mom. Good job. You sounded it out so well. Here is another way to build independent writers. Mom, how do you write unicorn? Why don't you try sounding it out? What is the first sound you hear? Can you help me write it? Please. I don't know how to write unicorn. I think you can try to sound it out all by yourself. You know all your letters, so why don't you try to sound it out, do your very best, and try to sound out the whole word, and then I will come and help you check. Okay? Try to sound it out. Unicorn. You. Ni. On. Like this? You did it! Good job! Here are some examples that help writers but does not build independent writers. Mom, how do you write unicorn? Can you help me write it? Oh, let me write it down for you. Okay? And then you just copy it, okay? Mom, how do you write unicorn? Try sounding it out. No, it is a C, not a K. C. And then O, and then R, and then N. Okay, good job. Mom, how do you write unicorn? Why don't you try sounding it out? U. E. Uni. Come, let me help you. Oh. 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 Kindergartners do need help to be independent writers, and we can empower them to be confident, independent writers by reminding them and encouraging them to use the skills and knowledge that they have already learned. We can also encourage them to use the tools around them, like their writing folders, offices. It is also important to give them time and be patient with them as they sound out the words and try to recall the things that they have learned and the skills that they have learned as they apply it to their writing.